Hello everyone, Prime here, and today we're going to be talking about the lore behind Merlin and stacking him up against the other mages to see where exactly he fit in this sort of power department, who he's stronger than, who he's not quite stronger than. So, we're going to be talking about Merlin as an old man, a wild man, and a child, and Merlin changed Uther Pendragon's appearance and made him look like the Duke of Cornwall whilst he was an old man. Gorlois was this duke and Ingrid's husband at the time. See, Ingrid was someone who Uther really was attracted to, wanted to be with. Luckily for Pendragon, Gorlois died and he quickly swooped in and married her, making her a queen, and together they had Arthur, according to one story at least. Apparently, she was already pregnant with the future king before they officially got married, so, you know, a bit of dark dealings there, but in this version of the story, that's all Merlin really does to influence much of Arthur's story. That, and foretell of a hero that would push back the Saxons for the Britons. Later writers made Merlin a tutor to Arthur, or had the boy raised by other knights with Merlin's consent. These were kind of dark times for Merlin because he was considered a bastard, and at least TV has shown us that being a bastard wasn't a fun thing in those days, and it wasn't really much different in this story. But anyways, Merlin created a legend and spread this rumor of a sword that was trapped in a stone. Whoso pulleth out this sword from the stone is right wise king born of all England. Many strong men, nobles, and other ambitious types tried to free the sword, but they all failed. Merlin tutored the boy Arthur and believed that he had the right qualities to rule England as king. When Arthur was 15, he and his stepbrother tried to pull the sword from the stone. His brother failed, but Arthur himself left with the sword in hand and as the new king. Merlin also helped Arthur to win conflicts against rebelling barons. But I guess we'll talk about that later in an Arthur-focused video. Because for now, I'm going to move on to Merlin as a wild man. And this is probably the most interesting version of Merlin because he's actually quite funny, one of those more likable characters, I guess. Kind of a wild man, I guess, is kind of the title of this section. So, Merlin was a bard and lawgiver in this version who fights in conflict between King Rodok and Peredur. After 3 of Peredur's brothers fell in battle, Merlin's grief drove him to insanity and he fled to the forest where he lived as a crazy nature man and he learned to speak to animals. But sometime after that, when he heard music playing, he regained his sanity for a bit. It was one of Ganydur's retainers who then brought him to the king's court. But because there were so many people in the court, Merlin relapsed into his madness and returned to the forest. Rodok tried to convince his brother-in-law to return with him, but after being refused, he put Merlin in chains. Rodok took a leaf from Ganydur's hair, which made Merlin laugh. When the king asked why Merlin was laughing, he reluctantly told Rodok that his wife met her true love underneath a tree. The king didn't fully dismiss the claim, despite Ganydur's assurance that Merlin was still suffering from madness, and tested Merlin's words by having Merlin predict the fate of a boy in court. Merlin gave 3 answers, saying that the kid would fall to his death, then after another look, adding that his death would involve a tree. Lastly, he said that the child would die in a river. Naturally, this sounded absurd, and so Rodok dismissed the claims of Ganydur's betrayal and found Merlin to be a madman, releasing him back into the wild. Before returning to the forest, he gave Gwendolen, his wife, blessings to remarry, as she'd been faithful to him since he left to go and fight off in the war all that time ago. He also advised Gwen that he would bear a gift for her on the wedding day, and that her new spouse shouldn't see him on the day, and that the new husband should also stay out of his way. This is a sort of gears, sort of like guidelines that if you break, there'll be a not very nice punishment at the end of it. With Merlin now in the forest, his prophecy for the boy's death came true, and the king realized his wife's betrayal and that Merlin was no madman. The day of Gwen's wedding, she saw Merlin riding a herd of stags into Rodok's court. Gwen laughed at this, which brought her current lover to a window and viewing distance to Merlin, who then responded by tearing off an antler from a stag and throwing it at Gwen's lover, piercing him and presenting Gwen with the gift as promised, because Gwen's lover kind of broke the rules, so yeah, it was justified. At least, justified as far as Celtic mythology is concerned. Now that you've gotten a sense of the kind of character Merlin can be, let's compare him to the rest of the gods in Smite, or at least specifically the mages. Now he's got quite a few spells up his sleeve, actually by quite a few I mean a crap ton. He's got several enchantment spells that he's used on Excalibur, Arthur's Blade, and other types of spells that he can use for shapeshifting, which I told you about in Uther's story. He, of course, could foresee prophecies that he demonstrated in the stories I told you with the Wild Man stuff, but also as a demon baby, he was gifted omnipotence by demons, which was altered by the heavenly gods to allow Merlin to know any event that had occurred in the past. He also spoke perfect English as a baby, a newborn child, that surprised his mother, and she accidentally dropped him. But he suffered no damage, and after a trial was held for his mother, in which Merlin was able to successfully prove of her innocence in the face of her charges of witchcraft. He predicted that a man would commit suicide after the trial, and as he expected did, and not only that, but he also revealed a certain unknown truth about the judge himself, which was quite sad, proving the judge was a bit, well, illegitimate. So on the knowledge side of things, yes, he's very comparable to gods like Thoth, say. I like to use Thoth as an example, I don't see wrong with him, or Kronos, say, not one to be messed with, but he's not exactly perfect because his sort of human faults interrupt that sort of prophetic ability. See, when he was an old man, Merlin trained the Lady of the Lake. And at the time, the lady was about 12 years old, and the agreement was that Merlin was to train this lady, and in return, she would love him just as much as he loved her. Merlin actually gets tricked, because after he teaches her a bunch of these spells, she traps him in some way, be that in a tower, or in a cave, through some sort of magic, that Merlin himself cannot break, but she can enter and leave this area freely. So he got screwed over, but I suppose it would be the equivalent of medieval Catch a Predator, except instead of Chris Hansen, you have the actual potential victim doing the catching and shaming and all of that. So, yes, sucks for Merlin, but you can see he could have foreseen this event, but it didn't change any of his actions, or perhaps he thought he could change fate, or he just ignored the prediction. You can see how he's flawed in that way. So a goddess like the Morrigan, who already has a great relationship with fate, and the ability to shapeshift, probably could deal with Merlin. Nuar is a very resourceful goddess, and I'm sure she knows how to flaunt it, right? She could probably take care of Merlin as well. And then you have, of course, primordial gods, as I mentioned, Kronos and Nox. And, they're primordial, so they're on another level above gods like Zeus and a lot of the rest of the cast in Smite. So he's probably not doing much to Kronos. He might have a spell to do something to Nox, disable in some way, but of course, he's not actually going to be able to end her outright, I don't necessarily think. And then there's Thoth, who he could possibly rival Thoth in terms of the number of spells he has at his disposal and the things that he can do with those spells. But I'm not too sure what to think about that relationship. Who would actually be greater, Thoth or Merlin? Because I definitely think it would be possible for Merlin to overpower Thoth, but Thoth could also overpower Merlin. So tell me what you think about that relationship in the comments. I also want to bring up the fact that Merlin actually, unlike some of these mages, actually took part in wars and battles, and I think that's a fairly significant thing. Even though he sort of lost his sanity, he still has that experience. I don't know how many of these mages actually have necessarily partaken in battles like that. Nuar, perhaps. Scylla would probably revel in something like that. Zeus is fine on that front. Poseidon's probably fine on that front. But not every single mage is going to be fine under those conditions. So I just figured it was something to just add to his sort of bonuses, his pluses. But yeah, in terms of answering the actual sort of title of the video, comparing him to the rest of the gods, he's probably stronger than most of the mages. Alquang, Scylla, Zhonghui, so on. But when you get to the top side, he's not exactly the king of all these other gods. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Where do you think Merlin stacks up compared to all of these other gods? Also remember that, Hi-Rez really does have free reign to do whatever the heck they want with Merlin, not just because he's had several different writers that have just changed him so much and given him so many different stories, strengths and weaknesses, and things of that nature. He's just gone over so many alterations that it's almost like H.P. Lovecraft's work, in that there's just so much that could be done with it. There's a lot of freedom Hi-Rez has here, so there's that. And to be honest, out of all the new gods that Hi-Rez announced to actually play, I kind of want to play Merlin just because of what they said about him being a triple stun switcher. That sounds like something that's going to be very difficult to pull off, so kind of interested to see what they do with that. But yeah, those were my thoughts on Merlin, and that was a video on Merlin. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and of course subscribe for more content just like this. And until the next video, have a very good day. I've been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one.